I'm tasked to talk about Korean unification and how unification will benefit the neighboring countries, particularly from U.S. perspective. So on the surface, the assignment seems quite simple. It seems extremely obvious that about manifold benefits that unification will bring to the region. We talked a lot about this during the first session. Particularly when North Korea today is the biggest source of instability in the Northeast Asian region, and is one of the most vexing and persistent problems that the region has been facing since 1950. It's quite obvious to me, but we still know that not everyone in the region really see unification of the two Koreas as a positive thing. Not everybody does, right? As apparent as we think the benefits are, we know, for example, that North Korea's neighbors, chiefly China, is very weary of the prospect of unification, and in fact does not welcome it. On the contrary, it is currently pursuing a policy that would indefinitely postpone unification. So let me just address this point very quickly before talking about the actual benefits of unification, which a lot of other speakers already talked about. Why it is that China and others are not really ready to jump on this unification bandwagon yet. China, as we all know, continues to be North Korea's main, well now I guess the only patron that's left in the world. It's still North Korea's most important ally. It's North Korea's biggest trading partner. It's key source of fuel, food, arms, you name it. China has historically and continues to support North Korea unconditionally, almost unconditionally, and has sustained the North Korean Kim regime dynasty, 3 dynasties now into 3rd generation, all in the hope of ensuring a friendly nation on its northeastern border that would provide a buffer between China and the democratic, pro-American South Korea, where some 28,500 soldiers are stationed. This means that China is not only not interested in unification, its priority has been avoiding any scenario that has to do with either regime instability or regime collapse in North Korea that would subsequently lead to unification. Which would, from Beijing's perspective, both raise the risk of American troops possibly advancing to the Yalu River and an influx of North Korean refugees that would flood China. Now, I don't think it's necessarily fair to just single out China as the only country that in the region that's wary of unification, because the truth is, almost every country in the region, for one reason or another, at minimum have shied away from unification of the two Koreas as a desired goal, even the two Koreas themselves certainly, at least rhetorically, stated that unification is a priority. I would say that even South Korea, even Chairman Hyun mentioned this earlier, until President Park renewed the South Korean government's focus on unification as in her Dresden speech, calling unification a bonanza, as jackpot. We know that some of our predecessors had real fears about unification, and that the South Korean policy was more or less sort of kicking this unification can down the road. And we can understand why, right? Because the percentage of South Koreans telling pollsters that unification is imperative has declined from 80% in the 1980s and 1990s to just above 50% currently. And among teens, I think this figure even drops to less than 20%. Most young South Koreans who have very little connection to personal connection or awareness of North Korea think that unification is more to be feared than desired. In the Sunshine Policy years, when more liberal leaders in Seoul actively propped up the North Korean regime, that reflected and drove this sort of changing attitudes in South Korea. And even the United States and Japan, which have much more to fear from North Korea's existence, and have less, I guess, limited liability of handling the cost of unification, still they have, over the years, adopted a de facto policy of learning to live with North Korea and the status quo of the two Koreas. This, in fairness, I think is partly due to the fact that US and Japan believe that they have little leverage to bring about unification, but also because policymakers are concerned about all the costs and the chaos that are associated with merging of the two Koreas, which include securing loose nuclear weapons, the possibility of North Korean diehards attacking US forces, massive humanitarian crisis. I mean, you know about all the challenges. They would come with regime change or change in status quo in the North that would precede unification. Some cynical scholars have even argued that, in fact, for the United States, divided Korean peninsula is in America's interest because it justifies continuing US military presence in South Korea, which can be then used to maintain China, and because the US will likely find a unified Korea harder to influence than today's South Korea, which depends on the US for military support. Now, I believe that this is an overly cynical view of US's policy towards the Korean peninsula. While it's true that the existence of two separate Koreas has long defined U.S. policy, it's not that U.S. policymakers are sort of came together and came to some sort of an agreement that the U.S. should not support or not desire unification of the Korean peninsula. It's simply that U.S. has been singularly focused on the denuclearization issue for the past 20 years and did not spend much time thinking about or focused on unification from a long-term perspective, how the unification of the two Koreas would benefit the interests of the United States as well as South and North Korea and the regional interests. In any case, all of the challenges and costs that China and others are worried about regarding unification, they are real and they are and very legitimate. Therefore, they need to be factored into planning for unification. I do think that it's true that even in the best circumstances, the reunification of the two Koreas would be more expensive and more costly than the merging of the East and West Germany, which cost $1.9 trillion over the course of a decade, because obviously two Koreas are further apart in ideology and education, technology and economies, you name it. But the fear of the costs and challenges should not lead US or South Korea's neighbors to decide that continued division of the peninsula is a preferable alternative. In fact, and here's my main point, there is a very good cause to question the widely held belief that reunification would be an unacceptable risk for the United States and Korea's neighbors. The unification of the two Koreas, I believe, will be a boon at the end, not only for Korea, but to the entire region, from security, economic, and as importantly, or even most importantly, from human rights perspective. In the first place, as we've already discussed and heard, unification, assuming that North Korea's nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles could be secured and its army could be demobilized, would be an incalculable security gain for the region. Gone would be the concerns about North Korea selling its nuclear weapons, fissile material, or missiles abroad, or staging armed attacks against South Korea, or potentially drawing US forces into yet another major war on the Korean peninsula. Obviously, South Korean citizens would no longer have to worry about North Korean artillery pulverizing Seoul or the North Korean Navy torpedoing its ships. We've also heard all day today that economically too, like unified Germany, unified Korea would be a particularly valuable trade partner for the US and China. And that South Korea's success in utilizing North Korea's natural untapped mineral resources and relatively young workforce could boost not only the Korean economy, but the economy of its close trade partners, particularly the US and China. And as for China, Korea was historically a tributary state of China, and while that relationship will not be reestablished, unified Korea would be an active trade partner and would probably triangulate its foreign policy between Beijing and Washington. Beijing already has extremely close economic relationship with South Korea, which in many ways is closer to South, right? And this close ties is expected to continue after unification. In 2013, the total trade volume between China and South Korea was over $270 billion, which is more than the trade volume of South Korea, US and South Korea Japan combined. So I'm just saying the unified Korea will be a further economic dynamo for particularly in the northeastern region in China, contributing to investment and cross-border prosperity. Now, I have to skip because I have no time. I can't get into the benefits for Japan. I can't get into benefits of Russia. So let me talk about one thing and end because I'm out of time, which is on the human rights thing, because I believe this is very, very important. Unified Korea, what would that mean? The disappearance of North Korean state as it currently is. It would be a tremendous human rights boon for the region and for humanity. Just think about this. Just imagine the benefits of freeing 25 million North Korean people from the grip of the world's last remaining Stalinist dictatorship. Average North Koreans could literally move out of, from starvation diet, right, to plentiful availability of food and information and consumer products and all the benefits of modern capitalism. Majority of 80,000 to 120,000 political prisoners who are sitting in gulags right now will be freed because they are consigned there for political crimes. So let me just end there. You know this. Like apartheid South Africa, North Korea is a moral abomination. North Korean human rights abuses, this constitute as much of a threat to the region's stability as much as nuclear weapons program. So if I can't convince you guys of the benefits, let me just end because I think that is the most critical benefit to the humanity that we don't need to talk enough about. Thank you.